Hi guys, Ed Haynes here to talk to you about the latest training block for the Performance S&C group. First and foremost, I apologize for the lateness in this video. This should have come out at the start of the new training block. Thank you to some of you folks who've reminded me. I will endeavor to always get out in the first week. Apologies, no excuses. First and foremost, it's really important that you brush up on the changes to the CrossFit Games season. A lot of you are investing a lot of time in this training and pursuing this this sport called CrossFit. We have had some wholesale changes to the sport, so I think it's really important that you guys do a bit of your own research to find out what that is and how it might potentially affect you. We have just put out a video on the Coastal Fitness YouTube podcast, which kind of shares our thoughts on the new changes and how it might affect people. We're going to take a slightly different approach to these videos. I'm going to start by reviewing the last training block, and then we'll talk about the new training block coming ahead, and then we're going to finish with some concluding comments. So first and foremost, the last training block, we've just finished a 4-week intensification cycle, and in fact the 8 weeks leading into that 4 weeks, we're very much prepping or priming you guys for that 4 weeks of heavier lifting and more sport specific work. We had kind of some tests sprinkled throughout our last week just to get some benchmarks on where you guys were at on things that we thought were important to get a checkup on. First and foremost, we tested a clean and jerk last Monday, so in the final week of your block. Really cool thing is that 35% of all the entries into our tracking system were PRs. So getting any PR is always a positive sign that the training stimulus is having the desired outcome, and to have 35% of what we would deem to be a relatively advanced group of athletes, that's awesome to see. We now have some new averages for our females and males, all-time highs, which is great. Females, we now average our clean and jerk at about 55 kilograms. And as a group, generally we're quite similar to one another, so we don't have too many outliers on that, which is always a good sign. Males, we're averaging about 85 kilograms, which is about 7 kg up from when we last tested it as a group. And that also, you must also take into consideration the fact that the group's always growing. So the fact that the average is growing with the group growing is a great thing. This is still a priority for us, so we're going to continue to hammer home these two movements and different variations, and hopefully over time we'll start to see those numbers creep up. Kipping handstand push-ups has probably excited me the most when I saw the results coming back in. We had 70% of all entries hit new PRs when we did our AMRAP test. Now, granted, some of you may not have tested this last time, so any entry would be a PR, so I'll take it with a pinch of salt. But the really cool thing is that our female averages are about 13 unbroken repetitions. We did have some real big outliers to this test though. We had one of our ladies hitting 50 in the 50s and another one in the 40s. So I've kind of excluded their results from the averages and taken it based on the whole. Males were now hitting an average of 18 repetitions. Again, there were a couple of outliers, but generally speaking, 18 reps for our performance group is a massive all-time high for us in terms of an average. So great job, guys. It's great to see our kind of isolated progressions paying off. We had a clean grip deadlift test in the start of your first week, the training block. Again, great averages. Females were averaging about 85 kilograms for a set of 3. Men, we're averaging about 140 kilograms for a set of 3. Those weren't even touch and go. So those are great places to be at this point in the season, guys. Of course, we're going to continue to push those averages up, hopefully. And this next 4 weeks, we are still going to prioritize deadlift absolute strength on our Fridays. Our next phase. So we're currently 1 week in. We've just finished week 1. We are in an accumulation cycle now. So generally speaking, accumulation cycles versus intensification cycles means that we're doing typically higher repetitions, higher volumes, which means the intensities of the weights lifted are slightly lower. With regards to our metabolic conditioning or our energy system training, it's a little bit less sport specific, so a little bit more generalized. and generally a little bit less complex. So really important that we move between phases of intensification and accumulation, just to unload things like our joints and our musculature, also to give our CNS, our nervous system, just a bit of a break from heavy poundage all the time. I think that the key for longevity within this type of training, especially when you're dealing with a big group, is to make sure you're not just constantly pushing and pushing and pushing. It's important that we go through phases where we do strive for perhaps a new 1 rep max, and then we move into a phase where the focus doesn't become so much about the 1 rep maxes, but it becomes more about movement quality, fixing unilateral imbalances, so on and so forth. What we'll do over the next 8 weeks is that the first 4 weeks we'll focus in even higher volume training, and as we progress to weeks 5 to 8, we'll just get a little bit more intense, a little bit more sport specific. A few specific notes with regards to stimulus. First and foremost, you've noticed that we've reshuffled the focus of our weeks. So rather than having cleans on one day, snatches on another day, handstand push-ups another day, deadlifts another day, we're going to kind of continually chop and change what the focus is. Now, we won't do that too regularly. The general theme for each day within this training block will stay the same. But as we move into the next training block after the 8 weeks, we will relook at the priorities each day and reshuffle it. And the reason for that, we do compete in a fairly chaotic sport, so it's really important that we don't get too accustomed or climatized to doing a certain stimulus on a certain day. We do know that, for example, Wednesdays we're probably more fatigued than a Monday. Friday we're probably more fatigued than a Wednesday. So it's important that we're placing our priorities within the training week to ensure that we are as fresh as possible to attack those things. Secondly, we are having a bit of a break from isolated muscle up work. It was great to see the muscle up progressions over the last few training blocks, but it is important that we just kind of take a step away, sometimes taking a step away to focus on new things like developing pulling strength, pushing strength, and just kind of removing the stress of trying to get better at something can actually be a very valuable tool in progressing in the long run. So we will be reintroducing it in week 3 of this current training block, and hopefully we'll start to see some great progress with that again as well. If you are at the stage where you're not yet linking or consistently linking muscle ups, what I do want to say is give you a nudge of encouragement to say that you all have the prerequisite strength in this group to do a muscle up. The thing lacking for most of us is just the linking of the pull and the push, and that is obviously very technique or neurally driven. So just be patient with it, but take confidence that you can do it, guys. It's just going to take time to dial in the movement patterns to link that pull up and that dip together. We're going to take a break from kipping handstand push-ups. We've done a lot of that, and we're going to revisit developing strict pressing strength overhead. So that is primarily in the form of strict handstand push-ups right now. It's still an important requirement of the sport. Not necessarily to say that it's going to come up as a test in the open. Well, it might do, but more importantly, if we do want to bring up things like kipping handstand push-up capacity or just any general overhead movements, we need to develop strict capacity first. So we're all going to always going to move in between phases of moving between strict work and kipping work. If you aren't at your first strict handstand push-up yet, which a lot of us aren't, it's really important that you follow the eccentric progressions. Yes, it's boring. Yes, it's less flowery. It doesn't look great on Instagram, but the same way you got your first pull-up, you're going to have to go through the prerequisite steps to get you there. We are taking a little break from snatches on Wednesday. We've been hammering different variations of the snatch. Whilst we are still going to focus on assistance drills for snatch, we're not actually going to do any kind of movement through the snatch, so that full movement overhead. We're going to focus a little bit more on things like overhead squatting and snatch balancing, and I want you to pay particular attention to seeing if you can improve your bottom position, and by accumulating more time and attention. Really useful tool there, guys, especially a lot of CrossFit gyms that don't have mirrors. Film yourselves when you're doing this work. If you can learn a little bit about what your movement looks like in that bottom position, it'll be really beneficial to you when you get back into snatch work. The last thing is we've been isolating the chest to bars and the pull-ups a lot on the Tuesday. We're going to take that chest to bar work that we've developed and put it into a semi-fatigue based setting on a Friday. So that's going to be a general theme throughout the next 8 weeks. The weekly split, Monday, we're going to prioritize squatting over cleaning. So that's why you're going to squat first. We're still going to get touches on cleans. It's going to be more in a fatigue-based setting. Tuesdays, as I've already discussed, we're working on strict handstand push-up absolute strength. We're accumulating volume here, so it's less about absolute strength but more about absolute strength endurance. Sorry, I should correct myself. And then we're going to be doing some mixed modal aerobic thresholds. So typically we're going to be incorporating some form of gymnastics piece with perhaps some barbell or dumbbell or even just bodyweight movement, where we're working hard for a short to medium period of time, resting for a short to medium period of time, and then repeating. Again, we're going to keep those Tuesdays quite varied just to expose you to some kind of different movement patterns. Wednesdays, we're working on snatch consistency, and currently that means actually stepping away from the snatch and addressing our positions. We're readdressing strict pulling and horizontal pressing strength. We haven't touched those in the last 8 weeks. It's important we maintain integrity of the shoulder by pressing and pulling in all different planes. And then we're kind of going to finish those Wednesdays with like a short, hard tester. Thursdays, of course, is your rest day. Fridays, whilst the deadlift has progressed a lot as a group, it's still a priority. So we're going to be deadlifting, focusing on heavy lifting at the start on a Friday, moving into some reintroduction of specific shoulder to overhead movements, but not actually in a sport specific setting just yet. So we're not doing cycling in terms of touch and go just now. We're just isolating the movements and getting comfortable and building some strength there. Over time, over the next 8 weeks, that will evolve into more barbell cycling. And as I said, those Fridays we're going to have a combination of kind of weightlifting and some gymnastics and monostructural exercise kind of blended in couplets and triplets, exposing you to small elements of the sport. Saturday is still going to be our aerobic day, so longer bouts of training. Again, keeping it quite fun at this point this season. So we're going to have partner workouts, team workouts, kind of long individual grinders, keeping movement variance high there. We do know that kind of when we get towards November, December, January time, that's when we're going to really start to move into an open peaking phase, where we're going to be much more specific on those Saturdays with our training. So the reason you're seeing those partner workouts, those team workouts in there, is just to kind of break up a bit of the monotony of your training by yourself all the time. Some concluding comments, guys. Warm up and movement prep, really, really important you do that. So if you're training in-house at Coastal Fitness, make sure you get in early and move through that. We do change the stimulus every now and then, but it is specifically chosen to benefit or aid you in the actual stimulus itself. It's also really important for general tissue health and joint health, and to ensure you get the most out of the training program. A few people have asked me about what RPE means, which they've seen in the notes a lot this week. RPE stands for rate of perceived exertion. Typically that's on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being not very challenging, 10 being very challenging. So the idea of having an RPE prescribed on an exercise, maybe in strength training or an energy system training, is to give you guys a bit of an indication as to how it might feel. Now, generally speaking, I only want to see a 10 if we're really testing something. So if it's a strength piece, if you're finding perhaps a 1 rep max, a 3 rep max, or a 5 rep max, and the RPE is a 10 out of 10, that means that when you finish your last rep, you should have nothing left in the tank. If you see an RPE of 7 or 8 out of 10, it means that we should be pushing hard, but not compromising movement, and we should probably have a few more repetitions left in the tank. Competitors' accessory work. Performance group, we don't prescribe accessory work for you, but if time permits and energy permits, we'd love for you guys to do it. The competitors' accessory work isn't necessarily more hard testers or hard conditioning. It's primarily based around structural balance, gymnastic support, and just general health. So we have a lot of kind of functional bodybuilding tied into those sessions, a lot of carries, a lot of holds. And as we get kind of closer to the season, that will look a little bit more sport specific. The very last thing from me, guys, is just to stay on top of your movement and mobility work. A few avenues to go down are, first and foremost, you can do your own research. Social media is a great resource, as well as YouTube. So just typically typing in a body part that you think might need addressing and searching for mobility drills or flow sequences or how to fix pain. That's going to be a great starting point. Other things are things like guided meditation, ROMWOD, seeing a physiotherapy or a massage therapist to give you some deep tissue work, or just doing your own foam rolling and your own kind of stretching protocols. Guys, that's it from me. If you do have any questions with regards to the training program, please feel free to reach out to me personally or any of the coaching team, and we'd be more than happy to assist. Otherwise, great work with everything you're doing. I love to see more and more names on that leaderboard, and it's great to see you guys logging your results consistently. It's really, really helpful to us in terms of prescribing your training stimulus. Thanks.